On a quiet street in San Diego, decorated Navy SEAL veteran Michael Jenkins was arrested for no reason other than the color of his skin. Officer Blyton, driven by prejudice and unchecked authority, thought he could get away with another unjust stop. But he had no idea the man he cuffed in silence would soon stand before the nation. Just wait until you see how this story turns, and why justice, in the end, didn't just speak, it roared. Michael Jenkins walked alone through the quiet streets of his San Diego suburb, the sun just dipping behind the hills. His workday had ended an hour ago, and in his hands he carried a cardboard box filled with tools, socket wrenches, a torque set, a few gauges. His motorcycle repair shop had closed for the evening, like it always did. He wasn't in a hurry. No earbuds, no distractions. Just a veteran taking a calm walk home, blending into the silence of the night. But to Officer Greg Blyton, something about Michael didn't fit. A white patrolman with over a decade in uniform, Blyton had developed what he liked to call a sixth sense, one shaped more by bias than by experience. In his eyes, a tall, muscular black man walking alone in a mostly white neighborhood was enough to trigger alarm. The cruiser's lights flashed, sirens chirped, tires squealed softly behind Michael. "Hey, stop right there." Michael turned, his expression steady. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked, his voice even, respectful. Blyton stepped out of the car with a hand near his belt. "You match the description of someone we're looking for. Hands on the hood, now." Michael let out a slow breath. He had seen moments like this before, not on American streets, but overseas, in war zones where civilians were wrongly detained, where fear overpowered facts. He knew how quickly these encounters could spiral. He didn't resist, he didn't argue, but even silence couldn't shield him from humiliation. The handcuffs clicked into place, metal cold against his wrists, biting through the skin. Another officer leaned in and murmured, "You see his tattoos? Might be gang-related." They weren't. The ink on Michael's forearms was sacred, coded emblems of SEAL Team 6, a unit few ever reached. They told stories of missions no one would ever hear about, valor without audience, bravery without applause. But Michael didn't explain, not because he couldn't, but because in that moment he understood the deeper truth. Words wouldn't protect him. Not here, not now. They took him to the precinct. No charges, no rights read, no lawyer present. Just a concrete bench and 4 gray walls. Blyton smirked through the bars. "You don't want to talk? Fine, sit tight. Maybe you'll learn some respect." That's when the system cracked. Sergeant Vicki Larson, an officer known for her no-nonsense approach, glanced at the intake sheet. The name made her pause. She looked again. Then it clicked. "Wait, is this the guy from CNN?" she whispered, flipping through the database. She ran to her computer, searched, found the military dossier. Decorations, citations, presidential commendation. Photos from Kabul, where he led the largest civilian evacuation during the collapse. She turned to Blyton, her voice cold. "Greg, you arrested Michael Jenkins, Navy SEAL, war hero." "What?" he muttered. "You handcuffed a man who's done more for this country than you ever will." The atmosphere shifted instantly. Officers gathered around the screen, jaws clenched. It wasn't just an error, it was a public scandal waiting to explode. Blyton went pale. He tried to play it off, suggested they release him quietly, no report, no fuss. But Michael refused. He stood tall, wrist still red from the cuffs, and looked Blyton directly in the eye. "If I had been just another black man on the street, would you still let me walk away? Would you have even cared? I won't be your quiet mistake, because this isn't about me, it's about you." And the cameras caught it all. By morning, the video was everywhere, filmed by a teenager who had seen the whole thing unfold from his porch. The clip went viral, sparking outrage. Protests followed, community leaders spoke out, journalists dug into Blyton's record, and they found more. Multiple complaints, similar arrests, but those men didn't have medals, they didn't have platforms. Michael didn't call for vengeance, he didn't seek retribution. He wanted change.
When the San Diego City Council announced an emergency public hearing, the room filled quickly. Reporters lined the walls, cameras blinked red, and rows of spectators, veterans, activists, neighbors, sat in tense silence. Michael Jenkins walked into the chamber with quiet strength. He wore a charcoal gray suit, no medals, no uniform, just presence. Spine straight, steps measured, gaze unwavering. He stood before the council, facing the room not as a victim, not as a celebrity, but as a man who had seen injustice and chose to confront it with integrity. His voice was calm, steady. "My name is Michael Jenkins. I serve this country, overseas and at home, willing to give my life for the freedoms we all claim to believe in. I don't ask for special treatment. I ask for fairness, for dignity, not just for me, but for every person who's been made to feel less just because they looked different."
There was no anger in his voice, no raised tone, and that, more than anything, commanded the room. He spoke not like a prosecutor, but like a soldier, someone who had seen the cost of silence, someone who had earned the right to speak, and did so not to condemn, but to challenge. Even those who came unsure of where they stood, they listened. Then Officer Blyton was called to respond. Nervous, defensive, he stepped forward. "I didn't know who he was. It all just seemed suspicious." A pause. Then a voice cut through the chamber. Sergeant Vicky Larson stood from her seat. "Suspicious?" she repeated sharply. "There was no dispatch, no description, no threat. You saw a man walking with a box and you made a choice based solely on appearance, and deep down you know it." Her words hung in the air like a quiet verdict. 3 weeks later, the decision came down. Officer Greg Blyton was formally dismissed from the force. The precinct chief was placed on administrative leave pending further review. And, for the first time in city history, a mandatory anti-bias and ethics training program was approved for all field officers. But for Michael, this wasn't about headlines or consequences. It was about change. And it came in a moment he hadn't expected. A month after the hearing, Michael was walking through a public park near his neighborhood. He didn't wear a suit that day, just jeans and a t-shirt. No cameras, no reporters, just a man breathing freely. That's when he saw him. A boy, maybe 13, standing alone by a bench watching him. The boy approached cautiously, wearing a shirt that read, "Be loud, be seen." His voice trembled, but his eyes held purpose. "Mr. Jenkins, I saw your video. I watched everything. My brother, he got stopped outside a diner once. They said he looked wrong. They shoved him. But you didn't fight back, and you still won. You made them listen. I want to go into the military one day. I want people to respect us, not fear us." Michael knelt so he could meet the boy at eye level. He placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "You don't need them to fear you," he said softly. "You need them to respect you. And respect starts when you can look someone in the eye, even when they try to tear you down, and not blink. I had to learn that. Now it's your turn." The boy nodded. He didn't say anything more. He didn't need to. That was the true victory, and the real inspiration. This was never a story about revenge. It was about a man who stood his ground and didn't bend. A man who faced humiliation with grace, injustice with courage, and answered hate with strength of character. He didn't just change a department, he shifted a conversation. And he did it not for applause, but for those who still have no voice. Because true courage isn't loud, it's steady, and it leads.